I'm standing in a bar outside the DMZ in Korea. Night off base. Me and a group of army buddies. The hostess looks at our group, looks at me, and starts speaking Korean. I gave her a blank stare. My buddy, a white guy, stepped in and started busting out perfect Korean while I stood there. She looked at me and asked why I couldn't speak Korean. I told her in the only Korean I had, because I was born in America. She was not impressed. Hey, I'm your host. This is I Took the Long Way, a podcast about life, detours, and somehow still being here to talk about it. Pull up a chair. Let me back up and give you some context on that army trip to Korea. I was stationed there for training near the DMZ with my company. We were interrogators, and interrogators were required to learn a second language. Mine was Tagalog. The rest of my company, Korean linguists, a whole group of white soldiers who spoke fluent Korean. I was the only Korean American in the group, and I spoke the least Korean of anyone there. Yeah, I know. So one weekend night, a group of us left the base and took a couple of taxis to one of the areas where the bars were lined up everywhere. 6 of us walked in, 5 white guys and me, the one Korean face. The hostess took one look at the group and walked straight to me. Started speaking Korean and I gave her a confused look. My buddy, a white guy, pretty fluent, stepped in and handled the whole thing. Perfect Korean, full conversation. While I stood there like I was waiting for a bus. She looked at me and asked me in Korean why I couldn't speak Korean. I told her in Korean because I was born in America. She accepted that, barely. As the night went on, the alcohol started flowing. My wall came down. Broken, barely intelligible Korean started coming out of me, and I just let it go. I didn't care, not one bit. Laughing, fumbling through it, making no sense, and having the time of my life. The Korean was in there the whole time. It just needed the wall to come down first. And then there were the mornings. Best breakfast I had on a regular basis my entire time in the army was at that chow hall on that base. Every single morning, rice, eggs, bacon, and kimchi. That's my mom's kitchen. My childhood on a tray. The breakfast I grew up eating that I never once saw at a friend's house or a school cafeteria, just ours, Korean. Something I never had to explain inside our house. And here it was, on a US Army base near the DMZ, completely normal, no explanation required. And I look forward to that breakfast every single day. Not because it was incredible, it was a chow hall, but because for 30 minutes every morning, in a country that I barely knew how to talk to, I felt completely at home. Korea does that. Take something with one hand, give something back with the other. My parents immigrated to the US from Korea when they were close to 30 years old. Think about what that means. By the time they got on that plane, they already knew exactly who they were. Korean, full stop. They grew up in Korea, they spoke Korean, they looked Korean. 30 years of identity behind them before America entered the picture. America was the place they moved to. It didn't make them. It didn't confuse them. They had to figure out how to live here, how to work here, how to build something here, but who they were was never in question. And then there was me. Born in San Francisco, raised in a mostly white neighborhood, a face that read as foreign in every room I walked into, but with no language to back it up. My parents' world was Korean. My world was a white neighborhood where I was trying to fit in but always looked different. And somewhere in the middle of those two worlds, I was supposed to figure out who I was. Nobody handed me a manual for that. Nobody even told me it was something I need to figure out. So I did what kids do. I leaned into what felt safer. I leaned American. English at school, English with friends, Korean at home, barely, and getting worse every year. The first time it really landed, was a trip to Korea when I was in elementary school. My parents took us back to visit family. Cousins, aunts, uncles, grandparents, people I was supposed to know. And they kept asking me, in Korean, why my Korean was so bad. I couldn't answer them. Not because I didn't understand the question, but because I didn't have the Korean to answer it. That's a specific kind of humiliation. Standing in a room full of people who look like you, who are yours by blood, and not being able to communicate with them. I was a guest in my own bloodline. I filed that feeling somewhere and didn't look at it for a long time. It wasn't mean, that's the thing, it was just genuine confusion. He looks Korean, his parents are Korean, what happened? What happened was America. That's what happened. And it didn't stop there. Back home, my parents' friends did the same thing. Korean parents have a specific way of saying things that aren't technically mean, but land anyway. You're Korean? Why don't you speak Korean? If you grew up in a Korean household, you know the tone exactly. Wrapped in affection and lands like a small judgment. Not a bruise, just a score. And that score got kept whether it wanted it kept or not. Too Korean for the white neighborhood, too American for the Koreans. Nobody let me just be what I was. A few days ago, I watched a movie called Slanted. It's about a Chinese American girl in high school who wants to fit in so badly that she pays to have surgery to look white, to be the right kind of person in the room. I'm not going to review it, but I'll tell you what I thought when I watched it. I thought, I get that. Not the surgery, but the feeling underneath it. The specific exhaustion of looking like one thing and never fully belonging to it. And here's what nobody really talks about. There are two versions of the tease, and they come from opposite directions. From the Korean side, you're not Korean enough. Missing something you were supposed to have. You got the face, but missed the flight with everything else on it. From the American side, you're not quite American either. However long you've been here, however American you feel on the inside, the face says something different. And people respond to the face first. No safe room. Just the wrong version of yourself depending on who's in it. But here's something that still trips me out to this day. When I see an older Asian person, my parents' generation, speaking perfect English with no accent, I do a double take every single time. The face and the voice send different signals and my brain has to catch up for a second. And then I catch myself. Because I'm pretty sure younger Korean Americans look at me the same way. I'm somebody else's, wait, that doesn't compute. A Korean guy in his 50s who can't hold a conversation in Korean. The Chinese girl in that movie didn't want surgery because she was shallow. She wanted to stop being the thing that didn't compute. I never wanted surgery, but I carried that feeling for a long time. I hadn't been back to Korea since the army. That was the late 90s. So when my wife, daughter, and I went back for the first time in 2022, about 25 years later, I didn't know what to expect. And honestly, I was dreading it. Not the country, not the food. I was dreading the moment someone would speak to me in Korean and I'd had to confirm again that I didn't have what I was supposed to have. That old familiar feeling. wrong version of yourself, not enough. 25 years is a long time to avoid something. I don't think I consciously avoided it. Life just moved the way life moves. But standing in that airport, I felt it. The same thing I felt as a kid in that room full of relatives. The same thing I felt at that bar outside the DMZ. My wife's Korean isn't great either, but here's the difference. She doesn't carry shame about it. Same language gap, completely different relationship to it. We'd be in the same room, both fumbling, and she'd just laugh and keep going. I'd fumble and feel that old thing crawl back up. The shame was never really about the language. It was about what the language meant in my specific story. My wife's family, cousins, aunts, uncles, they wondered about my Korean at first. Of course they did. Same look, same confusion. This guy married into our family and he can barely put a sentence together. But somewhere between the first trip and the most recent one, something shifted. They saw how I loved my wife, how I showed up, how I sat at the table and tried and laughed at myself and came back the next day and tried again. And the question quietly went away. They started speaking to me in broken English, Konglish, half Korean, half English, meeting somewhere in the middle. And when I asked why, they said it was good practice for their English. That's grace, the kind of thing you can't earn. Someone just decides to give it to you. I didn't have to fix my Korean. I just had to keep showing up until the right people decided that the score didn't matter anymore. Nobody performing, nobody asking me to be a version of myself I didn't have. Just people who decided I was theirs and built a bridge out of whatever language was available. Same thing that happened in that bar outside the DMZ, honestly. Broken Korean spilling out by the end of the night, once the shame stepped aside long enough to let it through. The Korean was always there, it just needed the right room. My wife's family is the right room now, and I don't have to be drunk for the wall to come down anymore, which is an improvement. We're going back this month, third time in 4 years. My daughter's really excited. She's Korean American, she knows it, she owns it, and I've been thinking about how that happened, because it didn't happen by accident. She's a little embarrassed her Korean isn't better. I recognize that feeling immediately. But here's the difference. There's no shame underneath the embarrassment. The embarrassment is just embarrassment. It's not a wound. That distinction took me decades to figure out. She was born into it. She does weekly Korean tutoring with a teacher in Korea, 1 hour a week. Not because she has to be fluent, just because she deserves access to the door if she ever wants to walk through it. She loves K-pop, and we go to the Korean market every Sunday after church. We don't wear shoes inside our house, and that is one non-negotiable, as it should be everywhere in the world, honestly. We don't celebrate every Korean holiday because we don't know all the traditions, and that's fine. We're figuring it out the same way we figure out everything else, together, at our own pace. My wife isn't ashamed of her Korean the way I am. She speaks what she has and keeps moving. And my daughter watches that all the time. A Korean American woman who isn't apologizing for the gap. That matters more than any lesson we could sit her down and teach her. We're an English household with Korean customs. Proud to be Korean American. No apologies, no explanations, no wrong version of yourself depending on who's in the room. Just, this is who we are. I watched my daughter move through all of it. Comfortable, somewhat confident. No confusion about which thing she is, and I think about the kid I was. The one who couldn't talk to his cousins, who got called out at every family gathering, who stood in a bar near the DMZ while his white buddy handled the conversation. She doesn't carry that score. We never gave it to her. That's not nothing. That's everything. My parents arrived in America already knowing who they were. That was their gift. 30 years of Korea behind them before they ever set foot here. Their identity was never the question. The country was just the place they landed. I didn't get that. I got born into the question. And I spent a long time thinking the answer was somewhere on one side or the other. More Korean, more American, fluent enough to stop getting teased, the right version of myself for whatever room I was standing in. But that's not where the answer was. The answer was in a bar outside the DMZ. Broken Korean coming out by the end of the night once the shame finally stepped aside. It was in a chow hall every morning with rice and eggs and bacon and kimchi that felt like home without anyone asking me to explain it. It was in my wife's family building a bridge out of Konglish because the gap wasn't a reason to stay apart. I didn't have to become more Korean. I didn't have to become more American. I just had to stop letting the shame decide what I was allowed to be. The Korean was always in there. It still is. That hostess at the bar asked me why I couldn't speak Korean. I told her in Korean because I was born in America. That was the truest thing I said all night, and I spent a long time learning to be okay with it. To my daughter, if you're listening to this someday, you were never going to inherit that score. We were never going to keep it on you. You're Korean American, and that's not a test you have to pass. It's just what you are, completely, all the way down. The market after church, the shoes at the door, the 1 hour a week with your teacher in Korea, that's not us trying to make you more Korean. That's us showing where you come from, so you always know where to stand. You already know who you are. That's all we can ask for. Thanks for listening to episode 10 of I Took the Long Way. Take care of yourselves. And if nobody's told you lately, you're doing better than you think. I'll see you next time.